Hello and welcome to another Rivian Tracker YouTube video. I don't really know how to explain this. It's not a podcast, but we're just gonna
Could be.
talk. It could be a podcast. We did do a podcast a long time ago, but it never stuck. But anyways, I'm Jose. I'm your host, and today I have with me my good friend Howard Pinsky. Howard, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jose? It's been a minute.
It has been a minute. Yeah, so let's backstory here. Howard, you now own a Rivian. You came from owning Tesla for a long time. I've known you for a long time. We used to actually work together at the Apple Store, for many years. And so, although our lives have taken us in different paths, we have stayed communicated and in touch, and always love talking with you and your wife and your family. They're all great people. So thank you so much for coming on and talking about Rivian with me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's been about 15 or 16 years that we've known each other. But we haven't, we live in different states, so we haven't really seen each other very often. But we do keep in touch, especially now that I'm in the Rivian boat.
Yeah, yeah. So Howard, you messaged me a couple of weeks, a month, 2 months. I don't know. It's been a hot minute, but a while ago, towards the end of last year, hey, I really want to get rid of my Model X. I want to get an R1S. And you were looking at different things, right? You were trying to figure out because you were kind of going to be underwater with your Model X, trying to get rid of it. And so, like, you didn't want to, like, there was a lot of things that went into it. And but after all of that is said and done, you ended up selling your Tesla Model X. You ended up getting yourself a dual standard R1S in Rivian Blue with Ocean Coast interior. Did I get that right?
I think so. It's like, well, no, I think it's the off-white, whatever that one is.
Ocean Coast.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's okay. We'll teach you. Yeah. So you got yourself that, and you've had it now for how long would you say? A month or
Just
so,
about a
maybe a little
month.
bit
Yeah.
more. Yeah. So let's. I want to get all those thoughts and feelings, but let's take a step back. You were a Tesla owner for a long time. I was a Tesla owner for a while as well. I had a Model Y before Rivian came along. I had pre-ordered a Rivian R1T long time ago, back in 2020 or so, and so really it was just a matter of waiting for the company to get built up and create vehicles. And so the Model Y was kind of an intermediate vehicle for me.
Yep.
You had a Model Y. You ended up upgrading to a Model X because you wanted something bigger. Is that fair to say?
I actually had a Model 3 before the Y. So
Ooh,
I've been
Model
through
3.
three different Teslas. I had in 2018, after I got hired at Adobe, I got a Model S, and our daughter she was like 1 or 2 at the time. So not a Model S, Model 3. So, that was fine. And then we moved to another state, a little bit of a colder climate, and our daughter was getting older. So we decided to upgrade to a Model Y, which was great. And then about a year and a half ago, we decided, let's just have some fun and go for a Model X because it sounded great, right? Those Falcon wing doors, and I like the Tesla experience for the most part. Those doors, man, it was good for it was fun for a week. And then the novelty wore off. And then we realized, and this is kind of what pushed us to make a switch, is we realized that it's a massive safety concern. Not just to me, because I got hit on the head a few times, but to people around us, especially at our daughter's school. There's kids, drop off and pick up. There's kids zooming back and forth constantly. And those doors, I don't know if they're supposed to stop or they're not supposed to stop. I don't know, but they don't. And they've hit several people in the head. And it's just a matter of time before someone gets seriously injured. So we made the decision to terminate our lease early. It did cost us quite a bit of money to do so, but for the sake of safety, I feel like we had to do it. And I've been looking at Rivian for quite a while, so that kind of pushed us in that direction. But I think what disappointed me the most out of that whole experience, because I'll just set the scene here. I like Tesla. I think they're doing some amazing things over there. I've owned three of their cars. Actually, to clarify, because I don't want to misspeak, I owned one leased two, because I know someone's going to call me out on that.
You didn't actually own it; you leased it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're wonderful cars, and there's a lot about Tesla that I like over Rivian. And now that I'm kind of getting into Rivian, there's a lot about Rivian that I like over Tesla. But during this whole process of talking to Tesla about the doors and the safety concerns, I spoke to many people, and I don't want to bash Tesla too much because, again, I do like what they're doing. Not a single person cared at all. Like some people, straight up told me, "Well, you just need to be more careful around the doors." So it just kind of put me off, that whole experience. So it just kind of again pushed me in the direction of making the switch to Rivian.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so I've never owned a Model X, but I have driven them. I've had a chance to play around with the Falcon Wing doors. Very cool, right? Reminds me of that DeLorean kind of feeling, and the DeLorean is one of my favorite vehicles because I love Back to the Future, so that whole ties in there. And so to hear, you're not the first person who has ever said, I'm concerned about safety with the Falcon Wing doors, or anything like that, and nor will you be the last, truthfully. Yeah. But it is,
and just to interrupt very quickly, like I'm not putting the blame entirely on Tesla because I acquired the car knowing that the doors did their door things, right? So part of it is absolutely on me, but there is a safety concern there, so it kind of pushed us in that direction. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. And of course, there's the whole, thought process of if the Model X ever gets redesigned, do you think the Falcon Wing doors will go away? I know that Elon went on the record many times saying the Falcon Wing doors were a huge pain to work with and work around and design. I can only imagine, right? It's a lot of technology that goes into that. So I get it. And coming from a perspective of having small children, potentially being around, an area where small children like to school and whatnot, I totally get where you're coming from. Would you say, though, Howard, that was like the primary reason, or were there any other aspects to wanting to get rid of the Model X that you had, or leave Tesla in general?
That was definitely the primary reason. I think if it wasn't for the doors, if they weren't a safety concern, we probably would have kept it until the end of our lease, which I think is a year and a half from now. And then who knows? We'd probably look at. Now I did have an R2 reserved. I mean, I still do have an R2 reserved, so we might switch over to that once that comes out. But I don't know. We looked at a lot of different electric cars, and one of the
that was
big
my next
features,
question.
Right. One of the big features for us is dog mode or pet mode or whatever you might want to call it. Every car is different, and it surprised us how few cars actually have that technology or that feature. We looked at the BMW iX or XI or whatever it might be called, the higher-end SUV. And when we went to look at it, there were a lot of things that checked off the boxes, but we specifically asked about dog mode because we have a very neurotic dog. He has high anxiety, and for whatever reason, he does a lot better when we take him with us and we leave him in the car for 30 minutes or so. But we don't want someone breaking into the car because they think the dog is overheating. So having something on the screen that says, hey, owner's coming back, whatever. And the BMW salesperson told me they don't have something like that. But if you want to keep the climate on after you leave the vehicle, you can go outside the passenger door and that'll keep the climate on. And I'm like,
I don't quite understand. What is that ridiculous workaround?
Yes, but anyways, we looked at a lot of different EVs. The Ioniq 5, which your wife Ashley just got. I know they have the Ioniq 6 as well, but I think the 5 is larger, right?
Yeah, it's a very more Model Y-S, more Model Y.
That was an interesting car too. So we were definitely looking at that, but we were looking at all sorts of different cars. But for us, the Rivian was large enough to fit all of our stuff. And thinking about our daughter, she's gonna have lots of friends coming over or going to ski trips or whatever it might be, and the pet mode, all sorts of different things. And when we did take a test drive of the Rivian, there were a lot of similarities to the Tesla, which I feel like that was a deliberate design decision. So it made me feel very comfortable getting in that car immediately and just feeling comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, now I was gonna ask you because obviously, the first thing that maybe a Tesla fan would say is, well, Howard, why didn't you just go back to like a Model Y, right? But of course, a Model Y is going to be smaller than a Model X, and if you're looking for a larger vehicle, Definitely not an Ioniq 5, right? The other thing that would come to my mind maybe would be like a Kia EV9, huge SUV. Again, though, to your point, so many of these vehicles do not understand this concept of a pet mode. And that is a big thing. One of my friends, Kyle, he runs Out of Spec,
Yep.
huge channel and all that. They have a lot of dogs, and that's one of the biggest things they always pinpoint when it comes to these videos is, and talking about EVs, is just how many EVs do not have a pet mode, or they do, but like there's some crazy wonky workaround to get it to work because it's not really pet mode. It's like keep climate on sort of thing, and it just I'm worried that when there's not a specifically designated pet mode that, and you do this like one of these wonky workarounds like the BMW would say, what if something goes wrong and it doesn't stick and you don't really know. You go on your app and say, "Oh, the AC is running," but is it really? Like, there's a lot of concerns, and the last thing you want is something terrible to happen. And so I get it, and it seems like such an easy fix for a lot of people, especially because you have you're the new EVs of today, right? Rivian, Lucid, Tesla. You have the ability to do over-the-air updates, so that is a feature that can be easily added, right? Because
Absolutely.
I tell you right
It's
now,
funny you mentioned.
Rivian did not have it.
Yeah, that's
Sorry,
true.
yeah, I was gonna
It's
say,
funny you mentioned the Model Y and going back to it because during the sales process where I was leasing the Model X, one of their salespeople was was on it like very quickly. Him and I were talking back and forth. He wanted that sale, obviously, and
yeah,
a few months go by, or almost a year go by, and I was the door issue. So I started messaging him first because we had a very nice relationship. Didn't hear anything. So I sent another message, didn't hear anything. And I asked him, can we go back to a Model Y? Can we work something out? Didn't hear anything. He completely ghosted me. So at that point, I was just like, maybe I'll just move. I'll just move on.
yeah, yeah. That could be that leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. And before people complain, yeah, I completely get that Rivian salespeople are not always on top of it, so it's an issue across the board.
Of
But
course,
like
absolutely.
but if you want somebody to stay within the brand, and you would try to find a way to help them out. And so it is unfortunate that they couldn't help you out, but everything happens for a reason. Clearly it wasn't meant to be, and you ended up with, in my opinion, probably a much better vehicle for what you guys need. Especially living somewhere where it snows and it's cold and all that, you're gonna be doing adventuring kind of stuff, and I just think the R1S fits your lifestyle better, knowing you and what your family does, right?
I agree.
Yeah. So okay, great. Well, so that kind of so we now know, because I was going to kind of dive in and say, oh well, Howard, why didn't you look at other EVs? But you kind of answered that question, which was Petmo was a big deal for you, and so obviously that kind of already dwindled your list down to a handful. So now you're looking at an R1S. You reached out to me and you were like, hey, I found an R1S I like. It was around the same time, for people who follow Rivian know, they had kind of done some finagling around in their with their SKUs to kind of reduce complexity. So what that meant was you were looking at a dual standard, which meant they were reducing the number of colors you could pick and options just to simplify everything. But you got lucky because you were able to find in the R1 store a Rivian blue in your area, which you really, really wanted, because I think that was the color you were aiming for. So I sent you the listing for that, and I think you were able to work with Rivian to get your that transferred over from a different one to that one, the
Yeah.
deposit.
So little more backstory on that.
Yeah,
I was going through the process with Tesla to try to work out a solution, and it was looking like that solution wasn't going to happen. And then that's when Tesla announced the lease buyout program.
that's
Now,
right.
when they initially announced that program, they allowed for a very short period of time, which turns out it was a glitch, that anyone can apply for a lease buyout, not just people at the end of their lease, right? So I jumped in the app and I'm like, okay, let's do this. Let's initiate a lease buyout. I'll go to Rivian. I'll talk to them, see if they would be willing to buy out the lease, because
Yep.
they do that for other vehicles. And so I went to Rivian. They were fantastic in a city not too far from me. And they're like, yep, this is the new policy. So we're trying to figure out it on our end. But as far as we know, as long as you have an approval, which I did,
Yep.
we'll buy it out. Great. So I go through the process of starting to lease. It wasn't the Rivian blue. It was the midnight, not midnight. That's the Tesla color. It was like that grayish, dark gray color, because the
El
Rivian
Cap,
blue.
granted, probably
I don't know, one of those colors. It was a
one
nice
of those
dark
colors.
color.
Yeah.
And then at some point during the process, I get an email from someone at Rivian. They're like, yeah, the documents that Tesla sent us are wrong. It only allows you as an individual to buy it out. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound right. So I start emailing Tesla financing. And they're like, yeah, there was a glitch in the system, so we're not allowing that, or usually we don't allow it to go through, but we'll make an exception this time because of the glitch. So, and then this was this. I think I messaged you about this. This was the strangest thing. The Tesla financing person completely randomly added some dude's Gmail account to
Yeah, I
our email
remember.
thread with all of my financial and lease information. I'm freaking out because I thought at that point I
Yeah.
would have had to like find a lawyer because all of a sudden, my personal financial information is in some Gmail guy's email address or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Turns out that was actually one of the reps from Rivian, and the Tesla employee
Still
added
weird,
his
by the way.
personal
Like,
email address in there.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Still weird. Very
And I
weird.
spoke to the Rivian employee afterwards, and he was super nice, and he apologized on behalf of the Tesla employee. But anyways, but during that process, because it was delayed so long, and then that buyout eventually did not go through because all sorts of technicalities.
Yeah.
That's when you passed on that Rivian blue that popped up.
Yep.
And I just decided, you know what? Maybe this is a sign. I'll just ditch the buyout option. I'll buy out the lease or terminate the lease early. And I'll just go for the Rivian blue.
Yep. Yep. And so you ended up, and we won't go into details, but you did end up kind of out some money because of having to go do that. But what I told you, what I texted you was, if you think it makes financial sense for you to do this, do it. Only you know that, right? And clearly it did work in your favor because a couple of days later you're like, I did it. I traded back the Model X, and now we're waiting for the R1S, and then you got a delivery date pretty quickly because we were at the Q4 for 2024, which Rivian was trying to push vehicles out really fast. They were like, we want to get one in as many hands as possible. So that worked in your benefit as well to get it quickly and not have to wait, 6 weeks to get it.
Yeah, I think I picked it up on the 31st or something like that, or the
Crazy,
30th, right before the
Yeah.
new year. I dropped off the Model X, and that was a very fast process, which was great. And I took an Uber over to Rivian, picked that one up, and it was a pretty seamless process.
Awesome. Well, so now you've had the Rivian for, like you said, almost a month.
Yep.
You and your family have had a chance to use it. I reached out to you and said, early on, I'm like, hey, once you've had a little while with it, let's have a conversation and talk about it because I think it's worth the conversation to especially someone like, and I've known you, so like I figured somebody would care to talk about this and hear what you went through because maybe they're in a similar boat. And so now you're here, and tell me a little bit about what your experience has been like owning your R1S in your kind of day-to-day life.
Yeah, so it's definitely only been a month. So, I'm not an expert on Rivian. I still have a lot of driving to do to really say, like, I like the Rivian over the Tesla, or I like the Tesla over the Rivian. Because I know
Sure.
I posted twice on Twitter. I'm still going to call it Twitter.
It's
And
Twitter.
man, those posts were wild, dude. The first one went relatively viral. I don't know how many views it has now, but man, there were some comments in there. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But for the most part, I really like it. I think it's a pretty smooth ride. There are some things I don't like about it. Some things I like better from Tesla. We'll talk
Sure.
about the self-driving or driver assist in just a moment because that's a big topic. But there are a lot of little things. There are a lot of big things that I like. I like the fact that it's bigger, right? The frunk is massive, which is great because we use that quite a bit for like groceries or takeout food or just storing random things in there, which is wonderful. Our daughter loves the larger back. We can, we have an extra row. So if family comes over, which happens quite often, we have that extra row in the back. But there are things, I've been creating a list of things that either I don't like about the Rivian or I would like to see change. Things like, when I reverse, and these are excuse me. Some of them have been requested before. I pay a lot of attention to the
but
Rivian
let's talk
subreddit.
about them because there is a roadmap, right, of
Right.
of some Rivian software features coming. So some of the things that you talk and as you may or may not know, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but I work really closely with the software team at Rivian. We have a really good relationship. So there is I will happily, and I tell this to anybody, if you have feedback, pass it along. I'll try my darnest to get it to the right people, right? But let's talk about some of these gripes because exactly like you said, and what we said earlier, these are software defined vehicles, meaning a lot of these, unless it's a specific hardware thing, oh Jose, the ice builds up on the headlights and it's terrible, which is an actual problem.
I
And
saw that patent that they came out with. So that
that would be huge, yeah. But so it's those are little things. But yeah, tell me a little bit, and let's leave out the self-driving stuff because we'll talk about that a little bit later because that is a conversation its own, and I feel like you and I are kind of on the same page about it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But throw me some stuff.
Yeah, so most of them are software related. The one thing that's probably hardware related is the inside of the car. I don't know how to describe it. Is a lot noisier than, and I'm not talking about wind, but it's probably the hydraulic system or the heat system or something. But there's a lot of noises that randomly happen in the Rivian. When I start driving, it sounds like it's probably the hydraulic system because there are different levels that the car can adjust to. And then I think when it gets very cold where I live, there's it almost, someone said it could be the heat pump or something, but it sounds like a for about 20 seconds or so.
Yeah.
And these are things I simply just didn't experience with the Teslas. Very minor things because the noises are temporary. So it's not something that, would make me want to switch back. But things that would probably be software related. One thing I loved in my Tesla is when you put it in reverse, the mirrors tilted down so you can see the road at the bottom.
That is a highly requested feature, and it is coming. It's been promised. Yeah.
Another thing that I think I posted on one of the replies on Twitter, relatively minor thing, but I can't stand the navigation lady's voice.
Wait, especially okay, but my question to you is, why do you have that on?
I don't know. That's a good question. That's a very good question. But I would like
my first question to you is why is it on?
A few options.
I will be completely honest with you, Howard. I don't think I've ever heard that lady's voice. I have that. I've had it turned off. It's not worth it. I'll have to check it out. You might be the first person to ever complain about that, but only because I don't think the first thing I do when if I ever get a new car is I go in. I'm as soon as it starts talking, I'm mute. I don't need you to talk to me, please and thank you.
No, I
don't even know what she sounds like.
I get distracted. I don't know if it's my ADHD or something, but I get distracted a lot, so I don't look at the map. And it's nice that we have two maps now. There's one on the center, but I don't look at the map very often, so I kind of need that verbal to hey, got to turn over there. But yeah, maybe most people have it turned off, but I can't stand. It's very robotic and not as smooth as the Teslas.
Fair enough.
UI customization, I'd love to see more of that. Things like being able to move the music player over to the left instead of the right, or various little UI customizations. Yeah. One thing I ran into the other day that I loved on the Tesla is when you add a favorite, because we have a whole list of favorites of our daughter's friends' houses or places we go to, you can't name the favorites. So you're stuck with just seeing the address. And I know that's been requested before because I saw it on Reddit as well. And then the last thing so far that I have on my list is, and I don't know if this is hardware or software, it might be hardware, but it's not much of an issue now that I've figured it out, but the heat is different on Tesla versus Rivian. So in Tesla, when I was warming up the car, I would set it to 72, get in the car, and it would be nice and toasty. 72 in the Rivian, I don't know if it's because it's a bigger car or it just works differently, is not nice and toasty. So I have to bump it up to 76 when I'm heating up the car, which now that it's at 76, perfectly fine. So maybe it's not a big issue. Maybe it's only an issue for people switching from Tesla to Rivian, but something I wrote down.
Yeah, no, I will. I can touch on all those because, like you said, other than the robotic voice, I've heard them all. I on the heat, I have to agree with you. Now, I live in Florida where it's hot, so like I don't use the heat often. Although today I'm wearing, it's cold today. It's in the 40s. That's cold for Central Florida. Okay,
It was -8 where I am today, so
that's cold. So I completely understand the issue with the heat variation. Like so, I struggle sometimes because 69 degrees is either too cold and 70 degrees is too hot. And there's never like a middle ground. I'm like, I want 69 and a half degrees. Like that is, it's true though. Like, so I completely hear you. Like the HVAC is weird in that what you think is going to be warm is not, or what you think is going to be cold is not. And so I do have to wonder though, I think that can be tweaked via software. Maybe, right? Like I don't know, truthfully. Your noises. Everything you said there is very valid. People have complained. The Generation 2, which is what you have now, the Generation 2 vehicles, the heat pump was added, right? Because Generation 1 did not have a heat pump. Heat pump has definitely made a lot of people upset at just because of the amount of vibration and noise that comes from it. Here's a fun little fact for you. In Generation 1, the HVAC fan and all that was mounted on the firewall of the vehicle, right? So like right against where you're sitting. And there were some issues where you would hear it and it would be loud, but it wasn't too much of an issue. For this generation, the frunk actually got a little bit smaller because they ended up mounting it farther forward. The what's it called? The heat pump. But even with that, I feel like the heat pump is louder and like you can hear it and it vibrates a little bit more. I haven't experienced this, but I know people have experienced like, oh, I can feel it through the steering wheel. Like you can feel the vibration on the steering wheel of the heat pump. Yeah. So I have to imagine that definitely in cooler temperature climates where you're definitely going to be running that heat pump, this is an issue. Of course, like you said, most people, after a little while, it goes away. It's kind of like the initial load up. And of course, the other issue is the half shafts, the squeaking. And I don't know why Rivian hasn't figured this out yet, but this has been an issue since Gen 1 where the suspension squeaks. And sometimes really loudly, sometimes not. Like in my Gen 1, was very loud. My Gen 2, I don't hear it. But there's other people with Gen 2 who are like, what's happening? Like, it makes so much noise. So truthfully, who knows, right? I don't think they'll ever be able to figure that out clearly because they haven't yet. But then it makes me wonder, like, Model X or even like Cybertruck, right, has air suspension, like, but it doesn't have this issue. So maybe it's just where Rivian's getting their supply parts from. I don't know. Who knows? So yeah, I mean, so it sounds like, yeah, a lot of little things here and there. It doesn't sound like anything major, which is good.
so far no.
So far, no. But I will say that as you use it, you'll probably find new nuances that you don't like, and you'll find things that you do like. And, you know, I will say that Tesla has had the advantage of having a lot of years ahead of it, behind it, I should say, where it's had time to build. Because if you talk to people who had an early Tesla, they'll tell you the struggles that they went through, right, with especially software and all that. So I feel like Rivian's going through the growing pains now, especially because they want to build their own in-house software and hardware versus outsourcing it to like Apple and using Apple CarPlay, right? Sensitive subject within the Rivian community.
I've noticed.
Yeah. But you, like me, have had Tesla, so we haven't had Apple CarPlay in a hot minute. So, we know that it's good for what it is, but I think that building in-house software and hardware is so much better, and it's, you control it, and I mean, there'll be a million comments on this video about how I'm wrong saying that, so that's okay. But it is my personal thoughts that I feel like building your own software and hardware is just a better user experience. But there also has to be, it can be, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I obviously had Tesla for 6 years, really didn't have a need for CarPlay. Rented a few cars during either work trips or when we were in Hawaii. All had Apple CarPlay. It was fine, but there was nothing really that compelled me to switch to another car specifically for CarPlay.
Yeah. Yeah, I know people who have told me straight up that they will never buy a car that does not have Apple CarPlay. And
Okay.
obviously everybody is entitled to their own, opinion
Yep.
and whatnot, but that it makes me a little sad because I feel like you don't know what you're missing out on. Like there's a lot out there that's really good too. Tesla and Rivian, even Lucid builds decent software. Like, well, let me say that again. Tesla builds great software. Rivian is getting to build great software. Lucid has CarPlay, I guess. So but yeah. Anyways, I'm not gonna go into a spiraling conversation about CarPlay, but yeah, it's definitely a conversation to be had. And so, all that to say is that the software will get better. You're gonna continue to see every month new software updates that come to your vehicle, just like you did with Tesla. And every month you'll get new stuff. Some months may be a little bit slower because there's months where Rivian just needs to sit back and worry on bug fixes, improvements, because you can't continuously add new things and then not refine and kind of tweak.
Of course.
We kind of fell into the habit there for a little bit, and with Rivian, where we got a lot of new features a lot towards the end of last year, and then the software just felt like it struggled, like it was lagging, like it was just like they were so focused on releasing Google Cast and YouTube and Sirius XM and stuff like that, which is great, but because of that, I think we suffered a little bit with stability and all that. And so now Rivian's taking kind of a step back and working on a little bit of that, especially now in the beginning of the year. We'll see a few updates that are not as exciting to users, but to me, I'm like, yay, bug fixes. That's exciting. Hooray. I love bug fixes. So that's awesome. Okay. Do you have anything else on that before we move on?
No, so far that's it. But
Okay.
I'm sure as the months go by, there will be other things. But overall, I think it's a wonderful car, and we've been having a lot of fun in it.
Awesome. I love it. Okay. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about autonomous self-driving and all that. So
Sure.
let's recap and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So obviously, Tesla these days has their full self-driving version 13. I think is what they're up to now. And I've seen content online from a lot of different people. And look, I'll be honest, it's great. They've really done a good job building out their full self-driving supervised, right? What they call it. Rivian, on the other hand, has taken a very different approach. Now, many could argue and say, Jose, why doesn't Rivian just license full self-driving from Tesla? And that question has come up many times. And many times we've heard RJ, the CEO of Rivian, and multiple other people pretty much say like that they're not interested in doing that. They want to build out their own autonomy platform. No different than why would Rivian not license out Tesla's operating system, right, that they use, right? You could argue all that. There's arguments to be made about both sides here, whether who's right and who's wrong and all that. And so Rivian has taken the approach of we don't really think that full self-driving autonomy is what we really want to do, at least not immediately. We want to be a little bit slower. We want to ramp up the features. We want to be able to, build out, using these pre-map roads, which are really annoying and I dislike strongly because like it limits what you can do. And so you will hear arguments on both sides. And I am not saying that Rivian is valid in their thoughts and opinions. And I'm not saying full self-driving is the end-all be-all. Me, Jose, personally, I like to drive my vehicle. When I take a road trip, though, I love to be able to pull back on the stock and let it guide me on the highway, keep a distance, keep me in the lane, brake if it has to, while I'm still paying attention, right? The idea of, again, me personally, sitting down and saying, take me here, and not doing anything, doesn't excite me because I like driving. Okay? So, now, Howard, you had a Tesla very recently. Can you tell me a little bit about what your experience with FSD was, if you ever used it, and then how you feel versus Rivian's autonomy platform, and then if you have any regrets and all that, because I saw a lot of comments in your Twitter threads. Well, you didn't try V13. You don't know what you're missing. Curious to hear your thoughts.
So, first of all, I'm with you. I like driving once in a while, right? But on the highway, I like just sitting back, pressing that stalk, and just having it guide me, right? And so far, the Rivian does a very good job on the highways that we drive on. It even changes lanes by itself, which is something that a lot of people in my replies are like, yeah, well, it can't change lanes. It can. Now, again, it's pre-mapped, so it won't be able to do it everywhere, I would imagine. Now,
Right.
yes, so I had 3 Teslas. The first one did not have full self-driving, I don't believe. The Model Y did. I bought full self-driving when I leased that one. And then the Model X, I did not opt for it because I had pretty bad experiences with it on the Model Y. But Tesla did give like 30-day trials every so often. So I think I had like 2 or 3 of those trials on the Model X. Now, my experience is it has absolutely gotten a lot better over the years, Tesla's full self-driving. And on the highway, it's incredible. On the streets, it's mostly good. Of course, when you're in different climates like snow, probably not. But what I will say from personal experience, and I don't believe I tested out version 13. I don't think so. I think it was like a late 12 or something like that. Is it got us in a few pretty scary situations. There was one time where it just completely ran a stop sign in our area and we almost got hit by an oncoming car. Didn't even slow down. It just right through. And then we were in like a downtown area where we live and there was a man walking a dog. It was somewhat dark and it was just going straight to the man and the dog. Wasn't stopping. Thankfully, I was paying attention, so I stopped the car manually. But it's those small things, even one experience, kind of puts me off, the whole autonomy thing. I want it to succeed. I want Tesla's full self-driving to do well. I want it to get to a very high success rate. I just personally don't feel comfortable in it just yet. Maybe I will in the future. I don't know. And also love driving cars. Like it's wild to me when I read all the replies on Twitter. And I feel so bad for like the Rivian social media person who has to put up with all this because they were tagged in all those things. The comments, like there are a few normal ones, like, hey, I get that you don't like full self-driving or you want to switch to something else. Congratulations, you're still with an EV, whatever. But there were people that were unbelievably defensive over the fact that I got a car that could not fully drive itself, which, by the way, Teslas cannot fully drive itself. You can make the argument that it can, but it can't fully.
Yeah, I was gonna say that is a topic. Depending on who you talk to, they will argue that statement because,
Of course.
in all fairness, I have seen content where you're sitting in your garage, you put in the address, you press the button, and it takes you there. Now,
Sure.
is it 100% perfect? It depends on the situation. But yeah, continue. Sorry,
It
I
does
just want to
much
make
better.
clear that yeah, I just want to make sure that. But that's why it's called full self driving supervised, right?
Right.
It's not so you can't just put you can't go to bed, you can't go to sleep. You have to
Right.
be
You
aware of
can't
what's
go through
happening.
drive-throughs. You can't wait in our, the school pickup line. There's a lot of things you can't do with it yet. Obviously, you will
Yeah.
in the future, but I just don't care. Like I told so many people, it's not a selling point for me, and they would continue arguing to the death. That one person actually responded like I think I may have sent it to you. But I showed it to my wife, and he's literally said, "Well, congratulations on putting you and your family's safety at risk."
I saw that.
Like,
Yeah.
what? I'm a good driver. I've been driving for like 18 years or maybe even more. I don't know how old am
Yeah.
I? 38, 20 years. And it's like, come on.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah.
It was a weird few weeks. But I obviously, I tagged Tesla. I mentioned Tesla in my first post. I mentioned them in my second post. So obviously I was asking for it, right? And I can absolutely take the heat that came on with that post. And it's just weird that how defensive some people, and we see the same thing with like iPhones and Androids or PlayStation and Xbox and Apple or Mac OS versus Windows. Like people get so just like what you like
Yeah.
and move on with your life. And if I don't like full self-driving, or if I don't want to have it on my new car or whatever, let me live my life. I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, it's polarizing, and I think what's a shame is that EVs in general have become a very politicized topic these days.
It's very
And I
strange,
hope
right?
it is, yeah, and I hope that we can go back to a time where it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. That shouldn't matter whether you drive an EV, right? Like that's
Right.
irrelevant to the cause. Like if you enjoy driving an EV, whether it's you want to help the environment or you just like the efficiency of it or you just like going fast, like there's a million reasons why driving an EV is better than driving an internal combustion engine car. But I also understand that there's people who will want to drive an internal combustion engine car, and that's completely fine. Like
Sure.
there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, so anyways, but yes, and so I think that Rivian Autonomy, platform it works well. I hope that someday they can get rid of the pre-map roads or add more pre-map roads, whatever. And I know they're working on that, right, constantly. And I think again, what we have to remember, and I think so quickly we are quickly forget that Tesla has had such an advantage. Okay, maybe advantage isn't the right word, but heads like they've had a long time to get here, right? They
Yep.
didn't just do it in 3 years or 4 years, right? And so Rivian is still a baby in this game. Yes, can Rivian expedite it all by saying, "Hey Tesla, I want to license your full self driving"? Sure, they could, but that's their decision if they don't want to. And
And is
so
Tesla
if
willing to
they
do that? I don't know.
yeah, yeah. Well, there's a lot of things, right? Exactly. And I know Tesla said that, yeah, we do that, but like we don't know, right? Like everybody's excited to say something until you're behind closed doors and the government is forcing you to open up your supercharging network to everybody. Oh, did I say that out loud? Sorry. But so, anyways, but it's all to say that it will get better, and I think that like for you and I think it's fine, to for what it does today. And yeah,
Yep.
Generation 2 introduced the ability to auto lane change. And guess what? It's only going to continue to be better. That's why I tell people if you're looking at a Rivian today and they're like, oh, should I get a used Gen 1 or a brand new Gen 2? I'm like, how important is the autonomy stuff for you? Because Gen 1 is kind of like, I don't want to say dead on arrival, but like it's kind of definitely like maxed out to where it can go. Whereas Gen 2 has a lot of potential still, running,
Yeah, and you
its
can say the same thing
fancy
about
tech.
Teslas too, because some of their
Yeah.
older cars have hardware 2 or hardware 3,
Yep.
and it just doesn't do as much as hardware 4, right? So it's the same deal. But I'm excited to see all that stuff get better, whether it's Rivians or Teslas or Waymo's working on a ton of different things. Mercedes and BMW have their own kind of driver
Yep.
assist type of
Yep.
thing. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's doing it. I think it's nice to see that progress, and at the drivers are still going to suck, right? Doesn't matter how good the car is at self-driving itself. There are still safety concerns, so you have to be paying attention. I don't think we're going to see a day anytime soon where you can literally go to sleep in your car, because there are people who suck on the road. And
Yeah.
Florida. I lived in Florida for a few years when you were there, and man, some drivers there are just terrible.
Yeah.
But I am excited. I'm excited to see it all move forward, and eventually we'll get there where full self driving is a lot better than it is today. But at the moment, I'm just not too interested in a system like that. Maybe in the future, but right now, man.
Yeah. 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 Same. And I had when I had my Model Y, it was not full self driving 13. It was whatever it was a couple years back, but I tested it. Did great. Like I said, it when we took road trips up the East Coast, up to Delaware and North Carolina and all that, it was great to be able to sit on the highway and be like, take me here and just monitor the road. And that was back then where again it wasn't perfect, but it did a pretty darn good job. So I think it's that was fine, and I think it will get better, and we'll see what happens, and maybe who knows, maybe one day Rivian will be like, you know what, we tried, it didn't work out for us, please let us license your tech, and that can absolutely happen. There's not to say anything, but only time will tell.
Yeah, and who there are other manufacturers out there who are working on things like this, like Waymo, and I'm sure there are much smaller ones. There could be an acquisition play in there.
Yeah.
I know they have a big partnership with Volkswagen, and that sounds like that might be getting bigger at some point. So there's a lot there that if Rivian maybe internally can't figure it out, or don't want to spend the resources or years to figure it out because maybe there's increased competition. Who knows? There's absolutely something else they can do.
Cool. Well, Howard, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to chat with
welcome.
me. I know you're a busy man. Is there anywhere that you want to tell people to follow you on your Rivian adventures now and all the other fun stuff? Obviously, you work for Adobe. You do some great stuff at Adobe. I've learned a lot by watching your content. But if you want to plug anything away, please do.
Yeah, I don't know how much I'll be posting about my Rivian, maybe once in a while, but I'm on Twitter at Pinsky, Instagram at Howard Pinsky. Those are the two main platforms that I typically post on. But it's a lot of graphic design and a little bit of photography related stuff. But if you're into that, come follow.
Yeah, and I think you got to create more post more photos of your car. I think that's what we want to see. We want
I
to see
probably
those
will.
fun.
Actually, the other day I posted, for those who may have not seen it, a picture of my Rivian with like a sunset or sunrise in the background, and
Yeah.
that was actually completely edited. It was actually originally just like a bright sunny day. So I'm going to be doing a live stream at some point showing the process of editing it in Lightroom and then bringing it over to Photoshop to like add the sun and harmonize the foreground and the background, things like that. But I might post more shots of the Rivian at some point. But I do want to, we should definitely catch up maybe like in 6 months or so after I've been in it a little bit longer. Maybe some software updates have come out just to see if I'm kind of still in that honeymoon period. Because I know a lot of people were like, oh, you've only had it for a week or 3 weeks or whatever it might be. Just wait. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. No, for sure. We'll chat again and we'll keep posting and we'll keep talking away and see what exciting things come. Well, thanks again, Howard, for coming on. I appreciate chatting.
Absolutely.
As usual, everybody, thanks again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this fun conversation. I hope it wasn't too boring. Definitely went a little bit longer than I expected, but that's okay. If you like this type of stuff, if you want to see more conversations like this, let me know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to Rivian Tracker as usual. Check out riviantracker.com for all your fun, not just Rivian news, but I'm kind of spreading out. I'm posting about other EV and charging infrastructure and stuff like that. I kind of want to expand a little bit more on what I do here because I don't want to box myself into just Rivian, but Rivian will always be the bread and butter for this. So anyways, thanks again, Howard. Thank you so much. I hope everybody has a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, guys.